Well, it happened. An online used car retailer has officially filed for bankruptcy, and believe it or not, it's not Carvana. Shift Technologies, which was an online used car retailer, has filed for bankruptcy as of last week. And today, if you go to the company's website, all you'll see is the bankruptcy filing notice. The company has now stopped selling used cars, and they are now instead focusing on liquidating their assets, which includes their used car inventory. Now, there are some interesting questions that may arise with the news of this Shift bankruptcy. What does this mean for the car market as a whole, and will this cause the used car market to crash because of an increase in inventory? Is this the beginning of the end for dealerships, and what does this mean for Carvana, another very popular and well-publicized online used car dealership that was on the brink of bankruptcy just last year? Now, Shift Technologies is on the surface a similar company to Carvana. Shift was a used car dealership who purchased cars from people, would list those cars online for sale, and like Carvana, they really leaned into the whole buying cars from your house thing. Because of this, it's probably no surprise to hear that Shift really blew up during the pandemic. But Shift was in many ways sort of always a little cousin to Carvana, and the company was never playing at the same level as Carvana, and they were also never really a threat to Carvana. While Shift and Carvana both went public within a couple of years of each other, Shift went public through a SPAC, Carvana did not. And while they did sort of do the same thing, the level at which they operated was very different. Carvana's all-time highs were much higher than Shift's, and Shift's market cap at its peak was at about $800 million, which, don't get me wrong, is no small feat, but it does get dwarfed a bit by Carvana's market cap, which at its peak exceeded $30 billion. So Carvana at its worst was still worth more than Shift at its best. And so yeah, while Carvana and Shift were playing a similar game, they were playing on entirely different levels. And as much as I am surprised to say it, a Shift bankruptcy doesn't actually indicate that a Carvana bankruptcy is going to be coming soon. In fact, if I was a betting person, I would bet that a Carvana bankruptcy is not going to be happening anytime soon. You see, Carvana and Shift experienced very similar issues: costly logistics of buying and selling used cars, a booming market creating an explosive business for them during the pandemic, but a slowing car market hurting their business today. But one of the biggest differences between Shift and Carvana is the resources that these individual companies had in order to stay afloat during their hardships. Because both Carvana and Shift have been struggling quite a lot financially. Both of these companies had massive learning curves whenever it came to buying and selling used cars. They struggled with pricing, logistics, delivery, paperwork, and all of these mistakes have been extremely costly over the years. But while Carvana has been able to restructure debt and raise more money, Shift hasn't been able to as of late, and that has really been the final nail in the coffin for them. As recently as this past June, Carvana raised $350 million through offering 35 million shares of their stock. And they also restructured their debt, which in turn would lower their cash interest expenses by over $430 million per year. And while this doesn't take bankruptcy off of the table forever, it certainly does take it off the table for at least the next 6 to 12 months, most likely. And Shift just wasn't able to do this same thing, at least not for as long as Carvana has been able to do it. In July, Shift did let go 34% of their workforce. They tried to restructure debt, raise capital, but it just wasn't enough to move the needle. And after Shift continuously wasn't able to raise enough capital, especially this fall, they really had no other choice but to file for bankruptcy. And there are a lot of different reasons for this. Shift will almost without a doubt blame their bankruptcy on the changing and declining car market. In fact, in their bankruptcy filing, they blamed it on just that. And they blamed their bankruptcy filing on things like changing car markets, tightening credit standards, and more. And my response to that would be that if your business can only be successful during unprecedented perfect conditions, then how successful and sustainable is your business in reality? And I think that this would not only apply to Shift, but also Vroom and Carvana as well. But another reason why Shift may have struggled to raise capital is because whenever we talk about online used car retailers, there are really 3 major players in this space. We have Carvana, Vroom, and Shift. And the different levels of success and market cap for these 3 companies is also in that order, with Carvana being the biggest company, then Vroom, then Shift quite a ways behind. And believe it or not, all 3 of these companies are struggling. All 3 companies were doing extremely well during the pandemic, during a time where people were locked in their house and the car market was absolutely booming. But at the same time, all of these companies have been declining quite rapidly over the last year or so. And as the used car market has declined, these 3 companies have really struggled to change their business model and to find a way to succeed in this changing car market. And my question would be, why would somebody invest in Shift to help that company stay afloat when another company that's multiple times its size is also struggling with these exact same issues? Sort of the argument of if Vroom and Carvana can't do it, then neither can Shift. So why would anybody invest in it? Now, this is just my opinion, but based off of the extensive research that I've done on Carvana, the used car market, and online car retailers as a whole over the last couple of years, I do not think that the death of Shift is indicative that Carvana is next. I also don't think it's an indicator that the used car market is in despair. But what I do think it does is I think it shows an unsustainability with how online used car retailers operate today. And to be honest, I don't really know what that unsustainability is. Maybe it's that people just don't want to buy used cars online. Maybe people don't want to sell cars online. Or maybe it's just that it's too expensive to do this sustainably. Or, maybe it's all the above. I think the risk of a Carvana bankruptcy in the future is very real, but I don't think it'll happen this year, but I do think it could happen at some time in the future. And I also don't think that the used car market is what killed Shift, though it probably did hammer the final nail in the coffin. Now, as far as what this means for the used car market and used car prices, ultimately, like I mentioned, I don't think that the death of Shift is going to cause some massive used car market crash. Shift didn't die because the used car market declined so much that dealerships couldn't survive. Shift died because the way that Shift and other online used car retailers are set up is unsustainable unless market conditions are perfect, like they were in, say, 2021. And over the last year, market conditions have changed. Have they changed enough for a dealership crash? No. But they have changed enough to where these businesses like Carvana, Vroom, and Shift no longer have the insane margin to keep them afloat, and as a result, they're sinking. And as far as whether or not this will cause used car prices to crash because of the influx of inventory hitting the market because of the liquidation by Shift, well, I think probably not. But it's also not going to hurt either. Last December, when Carvana took a poison pill, which was the strongest confirmation we ever got that Carvana was seriously considering bankruptcy, there was a lot of discussion that if Carvana was going to file for bankruptcy and liquidate assets, it could cause car prices to crash because of an increase in inventory. But Shift just doesn't have that same level of inventory to create that same level of impact. The influx of inventory from a Shift liquidation should absolutely have an impact on car prices in some car markets, but I don't believe that it's going to have this mass impact on the car market as a whole and prices throughout the country. I just don't think that we're going to see a 5 to 10% price decline on used cars because of the Shift bankruptcy alone. At the end of the day, I think that for us, the normal everyday consumer, the Shift bankruptcy really doesn't mean much. But I do think that it's very telling to the current state of the used online car retailer. Obviously, there is something wrong with this business model and how these different companies are currently operating, because Vroom, Shift, and Carvana, three entirely separate companies, are struggling with very similar issues, and it doesn't seem like any of these companies have worked through these issues to come with a real resolution. And it does make you think, maybe we're not as close to 100% online car buying experience like we may have thought, but I don't know. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.